let's loop back. All right, so we do have a quorum. I
I don't think how many do we need for a quorum?
9. We're okay.
2, 4.
Yeah, we only have
6,
17
8,
right now on the
9.
board, so nine is just enough for a quorum.
All right, so are you recording now?
Yeah.
All right, so let me just do this quick and get a little of the housekeeping out of the way, and I want to loop back to that. So I am calling the meeting to order at 6:35. This is a meeting of the 6th Regional Planning Board being held on Tuesday, August 20th. It's a remote meeting, therefore all our votes will be roll call votes of the board. In the event that we have technical difficulties, we will pause the meeting and we will correct those. If we're unable to do that, then we will postpone the meeting and then reschedule and continue. So I think that's all the housekeeping. Now we need a roll call vote for the attendance. So I can, you want to go right across the screen, however that appears to you?
Point of order, which is a good point. Thanks, Dorinda. I did forget that Jennifer is a non-voting member, so we are only at 8. So we probably need to wait a little longer to see if we get actually 9 voting members.
Okay.
Thank you,
2,
Dorinda.
3, 4, 5,
Kind of
6,
forgot
7,
about that.
8. Yeah.
I mean, can we have informal discussions still about certain things?
Actually, let's see.
Potentially,
Yeah,
as
we're
long as we're
under
not voting on them.
Right, because we would need 9 to just be over 50%. Let me just double check though, just to make sure that our list is truly 17, because it's been a while since we've met. Is Lynn still officially on the board? Does anyone know? Or did she?
Lynn is not. She is not.
Okay, so that we may
Good
be
point.
okay. We may be okay with because that may take us down to 16, and we agreed in our first meeting ever to make it 50% or above. So we may be fine. Let me just double check one more time our list here. Bear with me. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, so we're okay, because if Lynn is off the board, then we only have 16 at the moment, and we can continue. Thanks.
Okay, roll call vote. Greg.
Okay, let's Alan, Genevieve,
Present.
Dorinda,
Here.
Renee,
Yes, here.
Bill,
Yes,
Steve,
I'm here.
Deborah Pote,
Yes, I'm here.
and Deb Loomer,
Yep, here.
and Greg is here.
All right, so the meeting was called to order, and I guess it was so we'll just move forward, and we've taken a roll call vote, and we had our announcement about the hybrid meeting, not a hybrid, a remote meeting, and we'll do everything by roll call vote, and if we're having technical problems, we'll postpone and reschedule if we're not able to resolve them. Let me also, as part of this announcement, just to give you a heads up that Greg was successful in organizing another meeting with the representatives for September 5th. And we'll meet with the representatives, and then from there, we'll schedule a meeting with Desi and review where we are to date with them as well. So I'm picking up on something that I had mentioned in the cover letter and just sort of tidying up that loose end, because he was in the process of trying to get another meeting. So that was accomplished. So with the representative from Irving here, it reminded me that there was a document or an agreement that exists between the Gilmonago Regional School District and the town of Irving, and it had some implications. Bill had said that it'd be a matter of resolving the would the new district honor that agreement? And he also mentioned, I'm going to turn it back to you, Bill, about, I thought it was pretty clear, so I don't know where the confusion was, that it's a K through 12 district. The elementary schools are part of that district. Or that's what our thinking was, although the towns would own those buildings, and it would be the responsibility of the towns if that's the way the regional agreement went. And the middle school and high schools would, Pioneer would, of course, be the super middle school, and maybe six through 8, and all the other students would be going to the high school in Montague. So I hadn't heard, Bill, about what you had started to talk about, and could you go back and, because that's all new to me and probably the other members as well. I missed the article in the paper, I'm sorry.
Well, am I muted? No, I'm not. It's a simple case of Irving is regionalized K to 6 or pre-K to 6, whatever it is, and the other districts are pre-K to 12. So that is another issue that would need to come into play if Irving chose to join the region. Otherwise, they're going to continue to pay for their kids to tuition their children into the other system or other systems, because they also, I think, go to Pioneer, and some may go to Frontier. I don't know.
We only have a tuition agreement with Montague. If anybody goes anywhere else, it's a matter of choosing.
Yeah.
Your other comment, Bill, was about other districts, perhaps, and I think one of the things that I would like to see is that this new regional agreement has in it a process for other towns to become part of this new regional school district if this were to come to fruition, and that we create a pathway within that agreement for that to happen. And they wouldn't have to go through what we did for a very long, planning board process and so forth. So guess we could have more discussion on that when we get our way more along in the regional agreement. Deb, you're on mute.
Wouldn't the Irving situation be exactly the same as Warwick? Because Warwick has their own elementary school, but they would be tuitioning in for the middle school, high school. So wouldn't it be the same situation as Warwick?
Well, at the moment, I'm thinking that since this came about with Warwick, part of the district, and now they're not, that I had originally, Deb, thought that, okay, maybe at somewhere in this process, if Warwick was only going to be partially regionalized and have its own elementary school, my thinking was I'd have to go back to the planning board and to the towns and say, are you still interested in doing this with 5 towns? And so with that said, my thinking have shifted toward, Warwick is still in a great experiment. I have concerns about whether or not they would be able to sustain the feasibility of operating its own elementary school. Recalling that I was on the Pioneer District when Warwick eventually closed because they couldn't afford to keep the school open or run their own school. That's why they became part of the Pioneer District in the early 90s. So I'm kind of watching that pretty closely. Right now they're surviving pretty well because they have a $200,000 grant that's going on for 3 years. But how will that play out when we're getting ready to make a recommendation to the towns? I'm thinking we should be making a recommendation, perhaps just the way it is, that all the towns are part of the full district. So that's sort of my current thinking. Okay, we ready to move on?
No, I think Dorinda has her hand up.
I don't see
But
her.
I was just gonna say,
Oh.
in terms of the specific Irving tuition agreement, I think that's something that's easy to grandfather in, like, we'll honor this agreement for 3 years and then revisit or whatever. Like, I think that line somewhere in the region that we can, Irving to define whatever that paragraph is.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. We could, yeah, I like that suggestion. Since you're only usually being able to do things for a 3-year period, that would be the number, but I'm sure we'll come back and revisit that, when to sort of get on the same page, which I'm trying to do with each aspect of the regional agreement as we go through it. Okay, why don't we move on then? I think we can have a pretty productive meeting, but it doesn't require, I don't think, a lot of time. So for the informational purposes, you have the minutes to the DRAS meeting, and we will do that each time we get minutes so that you're, following along what their work is today. I'm hearing somebody. Okay, we all right? And so that's informational. Greg will try to have the May 8th minutes available, so we'll be caught up along with this one. And by the way, publicly, congratulations, Greg, for your assistant administrative position in Deerfield. That will require some additional time.
Thank you.
Update.
Well, that remains to be seen. My current job, which was taking up a lot of time, it may actually be less. I feel like I've been working two or three jobs now for several months. So I apologize for some of the some of the emails that may have been maybe not as my attention to detail may not have been completely up to snuff. I've just been sort of overwhelmed with a transition moving from one to another job. But I'm really excited though to be going into this position. It'll be fun to join Deerfield.
Yeah. Well, you bring another dimension to our work.
Yeah.
Neither Chris nor Michelle is here, which I'm a little surprised. I did talk to Chris. He was going to try to jump in to the meeting if possible. Of course, we'll see both of them on Thursday. So do you want to do a quick review, Greg, of where we are in the process? Or do you think the minutes, and I guess I'll put this out to the members, if you had a chance to read the minutes, does that suffice, do you think, in place of doing a kind of a review on the sections we've gone through to date? What's your pleasure?
Are you asking me or are you asking the board?
The board, I mean, would someone like an update in addition to the minutes that we released?
I think one interesting thing that came up, which Dorinda and I spoke on the phone last week about, is we came to a section where the Mars group would like us to define what the middle school is going to be, meaning is it going to be 6th through 8th or just 7th and 8th? And I think the DROS committee was a little unsure about it. They felt like maybe this was a planning board decision and not really their decision. And that may be right. But there were concerns about, especially like Gil, because in the past, Gil has been very sensitive to the idea of 6th grade being taken out of the elementary school and being required to go to the middle school because they've had that choice. So, but Dorinda, came up or at least expressed the idea of equity, which I think is valid. I think that if we're asking all the elementary schools to do this in a new district, that we should ask Gil to do it as well. And so we talked about that. And one of the things that sort of came about in my thinking was, would it be possible? I know that Montague is thinking about potentially closing Hillcrest and moving their pre-K through 2 to Sheffield, and that would require a building project. And that got me thinking that maybe this would be a good time to have a broader conversation that if we were going to move let's say sixth grade, or require Gill to move sixth grade to the middle school, is there an opportunity to sort of allay some of the fears of the closing of that school? That's sort of where this was going. It's like, well, if you take our sixth grade, that's sort of the first step. And then, then is it going to be another conversation of, we don't have that many students going to Gill, and therefore, is that the first step to moving towards closure? And I thought, well, maybe if Hillcrest is closing, that you have an opportunity to send, maybe it could be a portion of Hillcrest pre-K, it could be pre-K, it could be pre-K and kindergarten, and send those students to the Gill Elementary School, and allow that with the sixth grade moving out, that would allow room for a pre-K and more pre-K and K, and maybe save Montague the cost of having to do a building project. So I don't know. I threw that out there. That, I mean, in a sense, right? It could fill up the Gill Elementary School in a way that maybe wasn't thought about previously. And it could serve a new district in a new way in terms of the configuration. I don't know. What your thoughts? It was just sort of a preliminary thought.
Bill had his hand up.
What?
Bill?
Yeah. We actually have, Gill Elementary is well attended because we have intra-district choice. And actually, I don't know if there are kids in Montague that can choice into sixth grade in Gill. But I know the kids in Gill can choose whether or not they stay there or go to the middle school. So, and then you're also bringing up a serious problem. You're talking about shifting people from Hillcrest, young people, to Gill to help fill the school, but you're not dealing with the transportation issue. When you're doing that, you're disrupting the current transportation issue. And people that intra-district choice from Montague to Gill have to provide their own transportation. We don't have a bus because of financial constraints. So we would love to do it, but financial constraints rule the day. So all of that's very interesting, but I also think you have to consider in that conversation that Warwick also did not want their kids sixth grade going to Northfield. Leiden was amenable to sending their kids to Bernardston, as I understand it most recently. But now the current discussion at Pioneer is to close everything and fill their single campus up. So you're dealing with a district that is moving already to close all the elementary schools, and one that is keeping the local gathering spots open. So I think new dynamics are developing all the time, and it's a fun moment to be engaged. Thank you.
That was very well said. It's interesting because $200,000 of the opera money was used to, I mean, the ESSER money was used to do a capital planning, and there were a number of town officials that weren't very happy with that. So that's really up in the air, and the parents haven't. I don't know if parents at the Northfield are willing to give up their school. So you're right; it's an engaging time. The pushback I've heard is people aren't supporting that idea, but that could change. So I guess we'll all stay tuned as we move forward in what we're doing. I think what probably would come out of that as a minimum is sixth grade being moved over. We have Renee here, and Renee, you're actually in the district and hear how the politics and the different ideas. So can we just lean on you for a second to see what your thoughts are in terms of the town's embracing or not embracing the idea, or is it still in play and up for discussion? What's happening?
So my understanding, which could be flawed, it often is that they are, the school committee voted to start the phase of the experience where the state would come in. And I do think they got through phase one, where they're sending a team to check the viability of it. But then they have to get it through town meetings, because the cost of architects and all of that would be like the town's willing to, I've heard upwards of $1 million in funding. So that would go to town meetings, which would, of course, engage a lot of people and bring in a lot of opinions. So I think it's miles away, but it is being looked at, and the process has been voted by the school committee to keep flirting with it, if you will. Like, there's nothing solid. And I do think once you try to consolidate, the voices who have been silent will come forward potentially. I mean, it will raise a lot of different feelings, I think, being on one campus. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but they're like dipped their toe in the water, but they haven't been able to commit any funding because they have to get that from the towns, which is always a easier said than done.
All right, no, thank you for the update. My experience and what I'm hearing and what I saw when I attended a meeting was, I don't have a lot of stock into what the school committee says or would like to do anymore. I used to, but what I've seen is the towns don't seem to be on the same page as the school committee, at least in the small circles that I have. So I'm watching with interest to see how that eventually plays out. But I think you're absolutely right, Renee, that there are going to be a lot of voices that come into this that might just be waiting to say, no, not happening. So we'll see. So I guess we can move on, but that's helpful. All this discussion
Well,
is really helpful in the political realm. Oh, Deb.
Well, I just wonder about the ability, if that does get presented at a town meeting, you know, if they move it forward, if a presentation or discussion about our plan could be discussed sort of at the same time. And I don't know how that would look at a town meeting, because it's just voting. It's not, I guess, I mean, if it's at a town meeting, I guess there's an open discussion, but it would be a shame to only have one and not have the other alternative, but just saying that.
Well, that's a good point. Greg?
Yeah, I just wanted to get back to Bill. I mean, I think the transportation issue is definitely a valid point. And hadn't really thought about that. I was just thinking, if the sixth grade was required to go to the middle school in a new district, that the Gill Elementary does have a designated sixth grade room, and that would, in essence, open up some room. I know it's pretty full, but there is a room that is sort of a designated sixth grade room. So that was my thinking about it. But more importantly, it was more, I think, getting to where you were alluding, which was, with the opportunity of a new district and with these ideas of closing elementary schools, we should be having broader conversations as to what is possible with the infrastructure that we already have, as opposed to be adding to buildings, existing buildings, because I think that's a lot of money that could be spent that is not necessary. That if we just think about how we can, because we're down in enrollment, how do we move our kids around that maybe won't cost more in transportation, or find a way that may only cost a little bit more, but we save ourselves, potentially tens of millions of dollars in building projects that are on the, sort of being proposed right now. So just the thought.
No,
All
I
right.
understand.
Oh, go ahead.
I'd just like to add that the building projects are one issue. They're an issue of maintenance and wear and tear. And those buildings don't belong to the town of Gill. They belong to the town of Montague. Town of Gill has put an addition on in the last 20 years. And over those 20 years, there are more requirements for the districts to provide to the student population. And in all the schools, in all districts virtually, except for maybe Pioneer, whose building is quite empty, space is at a premium for, in particular, I'm thinking of occupational physical therapy, IEP requirements, that sort of thing, whether it's the school nurse where they can hold have a private spot. All of these things, in some instances, are being done in closets and small inadequate rooms, is the easiest thing to say. So to think that removing a class from the town, from Gill School, opens up a lot of space. It actually provides space for programs that are underserved relative to the space that they have to work in at this time. That's how I would look at it. I'm not saying you're incorrect in thinking otherwise, but that's how I look at it, is we need more space even in Gill School with a small population, and we don't have it.
Yeah, I'm gonna wrap up with that. I
Yeah.
really agree with what you're saying in terms of done several building projects, and it's usually about two things. The one major is the infrastructure and systems and mechanical systems, and opportunities to save a lot of money with the new high efficient energy things and grants and all kinds of things. We've moved into that. But then in the background, but equally important, is people have been working in closets, and there's not adequate space for all of the additional support that we need to give the kids. Schools weren't carved out that way when they first designed. And so that's a really good point, Bill. And usually those are the things that do move people to support a project. So we'll see. All right. Well, that was a longer item than I thought, but great discussion. I'm glad we have it captured. So then we have, we're on the potential for some ad hoc committees. And when I went through the process of trying with the DRAS committee on trying to figure out what would be the best way to elect people to serve the new school district. And we had some great discussions. It took up at least 3 meetings. I started thinking about other things that we could be spending a disproportionate amount of time on. And I don't want to take away from the good dialogue and the great questions that are being asked and the research that the DRAS committee is asking the consultants to do in addition to what they bring to the table. They're asking for more, which is really good. It could slow this process down, and we have a timeline to go to meet if we're going to try to stay on schedule. And so the first thing that came to mind was naming of the district. That when it's going to the towns, when it's going to go to the commissioner, if that were to happen, the district has to have a name. And so waiting to the end or toward the end of the project is didn't make sense. And also the DRAS committee doesn't have the depth and breadth of the representation that you would need for this to happen. So I thought about that. I reached out to 2 people with this idea. Deb Pote was one, and Deb Loomer, because they're in different districts, and just floated the idea, would they have an interest in co-chairing a committee or subcommittee or an ad hoc committee, so that we could get a deeper representation of some middle school, high school teachers, parents, and so forth, and have them work on that concurrently while the district agreement is, still moving forward. I'm happy to say, at least in the conversation, that both agreed that they would be willing to co-chair that. And my feeling is that I would put the responsibility on them, if they're willing to do that, to just figure out their strategy, how they'd like to go about it, how they do their representation, if they'd want to have surveys, however they feel would best include folks, and eventually come up with some recommendations of names that they thought that people could support. So I want to have a little discussion about that. If the committee is, if the planning board is in agreement, I'd like to be able to have us vote to appoint them to co-chair this ad hoc committee to come up with recommendations on names for the new school district. So, discussions. People on board? Does that make sense?
I'm willing to make a motion that we elect, that we appoint the two Debs to co-chair the committee that you named. The
I'll
name-
second that if they want to take part in that.
Well, they would lead that effort. Deb, you guys still have a thumbs up on you're willing to do that? All right. Thank you. So you two can get together, communicate. We'll take a vote in a second. We got to do a roll call vote, but I really want to thank you. And I do want to say when I reached out and spoke to each of them, they were just so positive about the work that we're doing and that how to some ideas on how you could solicit support. And also this might be good to have some articles about the process as we're moving through and on this aspect that is being worked on as part of the regional agreement. So we have a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote and I'll just go through quick. Greg,
Yes.
Dorinda,
Yes.
Renee,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes,
Steve,
Yes.
Deb Potay,
Yes.
Deb Loomer,
Yes,
and Jennifer. Is that you, even though you're non-voting, does that sound like a good idea? So if you want to have some participation, they would love to have you as well, I'm sure.
Thank you.
All right, so the motion and Alan Genevieve's yes, so the motion passes unanimously. So thank you for that, and there's no rush on that. You can organize it and take as much time as you think you need to get that work done. So depending on more conversations with the consultants and the DRAS committee, it appears to me that it might make sense on the financial aspect to have some representation from each town and a planning board or DRAS member to do the same for some of the aspects regarding the financial part of it. There are a couple of methodology. There were 10 methodologies that the Abrams group presented. There was a couple that seemed doable in the towns at that point. It's when they saw that, when we had an all-town meeting, gave us the green light to, yeah, go ahead and proceed. So I think that was a signal that there were some assessment methodologies they thought could work. Refresh my memory, Greg. Was Gill and Montague? They were both there as well at that all-town meeting, right? It wasn't just Pioneer.
For which all-town meeting?
And November, when we brought everyone together and went over the Abrams report.
Oh, when well, yeah, because we were
Yeah.
in Gill. Yeah.
Yeah. So no.
Are you, wait, which all-town meeting are you, we did it, we did an all-town meeting where we hosted at the Gill Town Hall, where we went over the methodologies.
Right, with Mark. Yeah, that's the one I'm referring to.
Yes.
So, and that was the one where people, after they looked at that, said, yeah, this could be possible, move forward.
Yep.
So, so I'm thinking maybe an ad hoc group could meet with the Abrams group again to answer, any questions, but also to get more into the weeds, because they'd have to look at the OPEB a little more. They'd have to look at the apportionment of how they'd want to do capital projects and things like that. And I think it would serve us well to have their expertise and voice in talking through that. So that the idea is to expand a couple people from Draws that have an interest in that with town folks. Dorinda, does that make sense?
I'm not sure. I'm wondering, are these, so each of those things is done separately, like the overall assessment versus capital costs, all these are separate line items, is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yeah, there are different there's different language in the regional agreement that will flush out, how we're doing it now in the districts. And so I guess my point of bringing it up is not to look for a vote or anything yet to, create those, but to give you a heads up that might be really helpful for a couple reasons. One, we'd get the voices of people that we'd want their support on town meeting floor. And we'd want to know that, they have something that their town could live with. And the second thing is to just give a heads up that if we're going to meet our deadline, that some of this stuff is going to have to be done concurrently, because I could see the DRAS committee being involved in this for just this aspect for like 5 months. So we need some additional people to help get our work done. So after we meet again on Thursday and talk some more, after we hear what the consultants have to say, we can better develop a strategy on how we want to go about that. But I want to try to keep the full planning board informed of, the moving parts and how some of this might play out and what we might need to do. So I guess at this point it's more informational, but if you have some thoughts or any planning board member has some thoughts about things in the regional agreement that they think might require a little further study and maybe a side working group to dig into it, please let me know. Greg?
Yeah, I just had a thought. I mean, I think we do need to get a sub or an ad hoc committee regarding the financial piece. Just, I think the assessment part will be pretty straightforward. There was only a few methodologies that really made sense in terms of the percentage movements with the towns. But I do think that there has to be a deeper dive, and I think Mars suggested that we need to wrap into that the benefits, the debt, and the capital costs and projects. So there's that has to be sort of folded into that. But the overarching question for me is, Alan, maybe you and I need to go back and look at the deliverables and where we are in terms of the grant to make sure that I'm pretty sure we have still the funding to engage with Abraham's group again. But I just want to make sure that we do, because it's, we've kind of moved forward with the district agreement, which, we had the legal funds there already, and we already had carved out money for Mars. But I just want to make sure we double check about going back to Abraham's group so that we're not, we make sure that we have those funds allocated.
Yes, and that's a good point. Now, I believe the answer is yes, but their involvement would be very limited.
Yeah.
It would be very focused. So I wouldn't, I'm not planning that we'd be spending a lot of money on that aspect.
Right.
I think where we're going to be spending a little more money and that we now have, we have available is we have set aside money for the legal review and aspect of this, because that's going to be critical. And we're going to be reaching a stage where we're going to have either our attorneys looking at that or having a regional, having an attorney that really has expertise in regional agreements. I know of one, but so that's another conversation about how the towns want to proceed once we get all the legal issues identified and a scope of work for them to dive into, and then get a quote from them on how much that would cost. So my eye is on that for sure. I had a soft conversation with Joanne about that a bit ago. All right, so I think we've covered item 6, unless folks had other. Looking good. Moving on. We have the just a review of where we were in the process. sort of made sense that we kept that in front of us. We talked about the timeline and what we were trying to do. And that also spurred my thinking of, oh, we need a little more, a few more people to dive into some areas to move this along. So that's informational, and we'll see how well we can stay within that timeline. The grant that we have for these folks goes until June, the consultants is June 30th. So we need to have all that work done from them by then. Update. This is the fun one, Dorinda. The website.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
It's not significantly different than before. We updated some of the pictures. I was hoping to get an image of Pioneer. It hasn't happened. Someone up there was going to take one. Just like as our opening, because it isn't clear to me, although the language is nice on a lot of the pages, it isn't clear to me that it's like if you went to the website, you wouldn't know that it's for this. Basically, you wouldn't know it's for our towns immediately. It could just sort of be for anywhere. So that is something that I'm hoping to get before. I mean, we can launch it like this and like soft launch it and say on our Facebook, hey, this is our website if you want to start reading the FAQ. So I didn't know if you guys wanted to do that now or we want to wait.
When you talk about pictures, you're talking about pictures of buildings and things like that?
Yeah, we have pictures of Gail Montague, but no pictures of Pioneer. And I think if just the opening image is the two schools, then it's clear what we're talking about right away to anyone who's familiar. So I think that would be a little more, we can, add other pictures as we have them elsewhere, but less important than just going to the site and knowing what it's for.
Yeah, I would like to see us have that in place when people go to it right away. Deb, that's just me personally.
Picture of the exterior of Pioneer, the high school, middle school,
Yeah,
just the exterior.
yes, just to like we have on our current site or our old website, but just like kind of out. I don't know if there's like original material for that, but yeah.
I'll go take pictures tomorrow and I'll email them to you.
Okay, awesome. Okay.
Do you want the ball field and a few other things like that, or just the front of the building, or?
I think, it's not essential to have the inside. So it's like, we want exterior shot of each building, put them side by side. And then I have like a map that I made that shows where the schools are. That's really just on both edges of Gill. It can seem like it's far away, but it's just like, only a Gill away basically from each other. So it's really not that much further. So I'm thinking putting that in, but besides that, unless anybody else has feedback, I think it's ready for, a sort of not a hard launch necessarily, because I don't think we have enough new information that we're trying to like get to people, but just, getting it out there so more people are familiar.
Dorinda, here's a question in terms of the facility. Would it make sense that if under each building there was a ledger and it just had some facts, like, I'm making this up, Pioneer designed to hold 1,200 students, present population 350. Gil Montague, in fact, so here's what it's designed or can hold, and here's what's in it. Is that would that be the place for that? Would that be helpful, or is that not helpful?
I think it would be a helpful thing to add to the FAQ. More information about each building, like what, I don't know about this other building, tell me about it, type of thing.
Okay. Other people's thoughts? soft launch or hold off a little bit more until we,
Well, I worked on it with Dorinda. Feels like a long time ago, but I thought it's stuff. I think definitely think we strengthened it, made it more positive and a little richer. But I like your idea, Alan, of even having that up front, just so that people know, like, these are how many students are in there currently. These are what the school was designed for. It doesn't have to be obnoxious. You could just keep it, like, you're not leading people. This is just the facts, as you said. Um, and also we just talk about the strengths and the challenges of both buildings, just really simply.
Hmm.
You don't even have to say strengths. You could just say, you don't even have to say there's a pool or no pool. You could just say they have a pool and a dance studio. Pioneer has photography studio, and just so people just know. And there might not need to be a negative. There can just be, like, strengths.
I
Yeah.
think that
Mm.
I would like to see Dorinda have her two pictures and then her map. And I think your cover should be fairly simple, not heavily detailed. And then your second page can be the same picture with your additional information. And that way you're not sticking it in someone's face on the cover, but you're using the same material to make that point. Is that fair?
Yeah, that sounds very fair. Deb?
I would just want to make sure that the information that you put out there about numbers was correct in terms of what the principal of the building believes their building to be. So I wouldn't want to have someone, and I know that this has already been done many times in the past, but to be in the present and you're talking about a building that a principal is in charge of, I would want that facts about their building approved. I wouldn't want someone to say, oh, my building has a dance studio, and the principal of that building says, oh, we don't use it as a dance studio, it's a this. So I would just, once again, if they're in charge of the building, this is data about their building, I would think you would run that by them before you tossed it out there, because things have changed since the original facilities possibly were done by the Mars, and the usage and things like that. I just, I don't want to step on any toes with the principal who comes back and says, you were wrong, because that just gives them something else to go, you're not doing it the right way because these facts are wrong. So particularly, once again, when they're facts, I would run it past the principals of the buildings. And it need not be a long thing. Just say, hey, this is going in our facts, our FAQs. Do you have anything to add or delete? Real simple, bing, 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 bing. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. They're signed off on it. Anybody wants to disagree, at least you can go, principals signed off on it. So.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
I
Steve?
had a quick thought about that. I mean, it's my understanding that both schools have brand new principals. Is that correct? So I don't know, how much do they know about what they have within their own the building? And, and I don't know if the principal is the right person right now to get that information from, but is it?
That they were smart enough, if they didn't know the information, they would then go to whoever did know the information appropriately and run it through them. I mean, once again, they're the principal of the building, and you can put in there, if you're unfamiliar, please find someone who is familiar, or whatever. Because I don't want someone to say, I got the information from last year's science teacher who's been there for 20 years,
Mhm.
they go, oh, yeah, that's right. And the principal goes, no. So I think they're the head of their school. They should be the people who have the final sign off. And hopefully they will ask the right people if they don't know the answers.
Yeah, so that's a really good, all that's a really good point. So I think, I wasn't thinking that complicated, but I think to Deb's point about highlight what the buildings have, to both of you, for Deb, you know, getting into the positives of the building, and for you to, maybe we need to have a data sheet that goes to the principal and say, here's what we understand, and then they add to it or you know, revise it. If we're going to have, to Bill's suggestion, I think is a good one, to follow up on another page that has, you know, more information about the building. So I wouldn't mind holding off just a little bit longer before the launch, but it's, Deb, you guys put a lot of time into this. If you think it's sort of ready once you get the pictures, you could do, like you say, a soft launch, and with a disclaimer that more information will now be added to the website as we move forward. So please check it regularly or something like that. Greg?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good idea to run it by the principals too. But also I think it's okay to add a caveat to whatever we post as facts, to say, you know, these are potentially subject to change. That, you know, our research has been done over many years, and that you know, we're giving the facts as best as we know them. But yeah, I mean, I think it's both, because you may not necessarily get a solid answer. And it may, you know, we may actually wind up with some of our reports. We're not going to go back into our 100-page reports and try to rewrite them to bring them all the facts up to date. So we need to just make that point. And then finally, Dorinda, you and I, we did discuss the agendas and minutes. And I think for now, I think what we can do is, like the agendas, we can just link to the old page for now until we get that sorted out. And then the minutes are, you know, something that I just want to make sure that we have all the finalized minutes and not any drafts, and just double check to make sure that we're giving the right ones. Okay.
And who's doing
I haven't
that?
forgotten that.
Oh, so you're doing that, Greg?
Well,
You're
yeah,
gonna
I
do-
just, it's been, you know, again, it's just a matter of working too many jobs right at the moment. So when things will actually settle down a little bit in September.
All right, so I'm clear. Are we holding off a little bit until we launch this, maybe next month? Or are we doing a soft launch with a disclaimer? What's your pleasure?
I think we should wait for the photos, so that we do have equal representation with the photos. I think that's important, just because their visuals are so important. And then, you know, as far as the facts, that can be a work in progress, and you don't have to wait for the agenda and minutes to be posted on that site, because we have the other one up. We can link to the other one for now.
So does it need to be clear in this, that, you know, we see the Pioneer site, we see the Gil Montague, you know, site. Should there be another picture of the town elementary schools have the following, and there's pictures of each of the elementary schools that are part of the district? Because I think sometimes we do ourselves a disservice, and it raises the question of, oh, you're just regionalizing 7 through 12. You know, you're always just talking about the high school and the middle school. And so we sort of sometimes are pointing in that direction, and people don't understand it's an actual pre-K to 12 district that we're creating. So I'm wondering if the elementary schools would be there, say, you know, part of the pre-K to 12 district includes the elementary schools, which are owned and which are owned by the town. I don't know, thoughts?
I don't know. I mean, we can also just do that with language. Like these are the buildings that will be shared. These would be the new shared facility thing. Like, um,
Okay,
this is the kind of thing where we can adjust it as we get feedback.
Yeah, I
You
agree.
know,
I
that's
think,
a good thing.
I think on the homepage that we need better sort of narrative to spell that out. That should be like front and center, that where the regionalization will include these, these schools, and you could even link to the elementary schools to their own websites, and that it would include regionalizing and explaining how the middle and high school would be regionalized into different buildings.
yeah. Renee,
Yeah, I guess I have mixed feelings about it. I mean, it was always clear that it would affect the elementary schools, but it was also not. In a lot of our discussions, like they were mainly focused, and all the research was done around 6 or 7 to 12, depending on how you looked at it. So to open that can of worms, I mean, I think we need to be ready. Like that's been like an unspoken thing, but we as a committee haven't really flushed that out other than tonight throwing around some ideas. Like that's really the first time, at least in a meeting I've been at. And I realize I've missed some, but like all the discussion's been around 6 to 12. So to throw that in will bring in voices that are of concern. So I don't know if we know what we're saying about it yet. So I don't know if we're ready.
well, that was Renee, we have talked about that, and that has been in all the reports, that the facilities reports, in terms of, it's a K-12 district, the towns own the elementary schools. So it's, and I think we've said that in presentations. I know we've said that in presentations, although not always fully full participation.
I'm not sure, Greg. I mean, that's
Uh,
not.
I-
But we never led with that. Like that
I,
was.
yeah, and I hear what Renee's saying. I mean, I think there's been a little bit of mixed messaging, and I think that's partly because when we went into it, when Michael Sullivan proposed this in the beginning, he said, the idea of changing the elementary schools or, potentially closing one was a non-starter. And so that was kind of how we started this. But what's interesting is that over these last 5 years, we now have discussions happening within the districts of reconfiguring their elementary schools. So I think that's what's changed, and we haven't really changed our narrative. And so that's changed, and we're like, well, how does this fit in? I agree with you, Renee. I'm not sure how we handle that, because if you went into a new district, I think those conversations would come up regardless. I mean, just what we talked about earlier, like how can we reimagine if the two districts are reimagining their elementary schools, then maybe we should be thinking about how we could reimagine the elementary schools so that we could save ourselves a whole lot of, potential building projects that may or may not be needed. And to Bill's point, they may be for other reasons, but let's have a conversation about that.
Yeah, and those would come forward. I mean, I imagined, and again, the timeline's been so stretched out to what I first thought it would be, but that the new district would solve those problems, like about their elementary schools, because they'd be a new district. So, like, not to say your elementary schools are sovereign and they'll never be touched, because obviously the lived experience of Leiden and Warwick are that it very well could be, and it will. I mean, it's likely, but I'm just saying, we haven't really had enough discussion about it that I think would be relevant for us to lead with that.
Well, maybe the way is just to be honest and say, we went into this, and give a narrative that says we went into this with the idea that elementary schools would remain the same, but we acknowledge that because things have changed over the last 5 years, and that these districts are even considering changing the configurations of their elementary school, that is something that would have to be, resolved in the future with a new district. I mean, that's just being honest.
No, right. I say that the new district would solve that problem.
Yep.
That would be the truth. I would hope that we do this part and then the new district could do the rest.
Yeah, I would agree. There's a lot that the new district would have to do. It's making me pause a little bit because I think the regional agreement that we're working on is with the information, and I'm sure the consultants are going to still have the language that, that Northfield owns and is responsible for the elementary school and so forth. Because we wouldn't be able to change that now. Now, obviously, if a new regional school district is formed, you're right. Then they inherit the additional changes or whatever is going on. If there are building projects or whatever they're doing, that's the new school committee and the new school district that's doing that. So, wow, this was a good conversation. Has expanded more into how we'll have to look at some aspects of the regional agreement. So I thank you and not thank you for that.
Well, and
More-
the funny
more
thing,
work.
Alan, the funny thing is these reconfigurations that each district is talking about could happen, and we could move into a new district. There's nothing to preclude them from happening. I mean, if it looked like it was a good idea to take the Bernerston and Northfield elementary schools and put it into this regional building, there's no reason why they can't do that and still have a middle school there. I mean, it really, in some respects, it might actually make even more sense to do that than to try and do a K through 12 through in that one building. So, I mean, I think those are interesting conversations to have.
Yeah, agreed. All right, so we're holding off until we get pictures and we'll have some disclaimers. And we're doing a soft launch. Is that what I'm understanding? Okay. Can people give me a thumbs up or down so I'm making sure I'm representing what you're thinking?
Thumb up.
How did that
Okay.
happen? I put 2 thumbs up and all of a sudden I had that's like a new thing. I did this and all of a sudden there was fireworks.
Yeah.
Never seen that before.
Well, Bill didn't move his thumb, but he did say he supports it. All right, so that's good. So if there's any other feedback as you're visiting the site, then give that to Dorinda. And that consultant or the person that we hired for that, she's done, and we've compensated her, and now you're leading the charge here, right, Dorinda?
Yes, she can still make some small adjustments for a number of months, but yeah, it's basically done.
Great. All right, thank you. All right, is there any other business before we start to try to nail down another date?
I just want to add one aspect to the conversation, which is the change in, I believe that, Greg, your depiction of the changes in Gil Montague is slightly different than Pioneer. In Gil Montague, a school that was a 1 to 6 school or K to 6 had become a K to 2. And the new building is maybe 300 yards from the current building across a field, and it's being added on to a current building, which is only 30 something years old, as opposed to the schools at Pioneer are moving from one town to another in a completely different situation. So I don't view the closure of Hillcrest as a change in the configuration in Gil Montague. It is the choice of the town of Montague to build an addition and close Hillcrest or use it otherwise. That's just a simple distinction that I think should be clear to everybody. So thanks.
Thank you for that. I was not aware of that. It's a good point. All right, so we put down, as to just get the conversation going, September 18th or 19th. And how does that work? We looked, right, Greg, and Pioneer wasn't meeting on the 19th, so that's why we included those two dates, right? How does Thursday, the 19th look for folks? I got a 1, yep, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay. And we'll do 6:30 on the 19th. And is there anything else that we need to discuss? Well, thank you for all your participation. Jennifer, thank you for joining us. And I guess we have a lot more to think about. It's funny, I came into the meeting thinking that I would have things off my mind once we got some of this done, and I'm leaving the meeting now with more things to think about, a lot more. So I do appreciate that. All right, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, and the time is 7:41.
Second,
And so Renee, who made that motion?
Dorinda.
Dorinda,
Dorinda?
seconded by Deb Loomer.
Deb. All right. And roll call vote. So Greg,
Yes.
Dorinda,
Yes.
Renee,
Yep.
Bill,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Deb Potey,
Yes.
and Deb Loomer,
yep.
and Jen. You can vote on this. Why not?
Yeah.
You get to leave. All right. Thank you, everyone. And so we'll see you in September as the song goes. Talk to you later.
Have a
Take
good night.
care.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.